One second, I'll come to this in a while, but we will first look at the syllabus. So first unit is completed, second unit is completed, and the third unit is also kind of completed, but I will try to I'm making a PPT for this. Yeah. Then we finished melanoma and the signaling pathways. We have two courses, that is two lessons in third unit. That will be breast cancer and then the therapeutic applications or strategies. And after that, we have fourth unit about mesenchymal stem cells, cell therapy for heart diseases and neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and then strategies for beta cell replacement. And the final one is humanized mice models. So because if I have to take, I'll have to take breast cancer and so on. Breast cancer stem cells. It's about everything that we are reading is about cancer stem cells in this particular unit. So I would want you to I want a break from it. So I want to take up the strategies for beta cell replacement. We'll learn some biology of diabetes, and then we will move on to about trying to regenerate how to deal with diabetes. You'll all feel comfortable. Just give me one second. Okay. Did somebody ask? You said you will ask her to call me up. Did somebody try doing that? Who's the girl? I forgot. Shringa, you told me that you'll tell her to call me, right?
Vaishnavi said she'll tell her, sir.
Sir, I sent her message, sir, but she didn't see it, sir.
Say it again.
She
You
didn't
sent a
see it.
message.
Hello?
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, I sent her message, sir.
Okay.
She didn't see it.
Okay. Please try to call her once and tell her to contact me. Yeah?
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. That's fine. Okay, so we will now read about strategies towards beta cell replacement. It is basically about diabetes, right? You know about diabetes. Diabetes is hyperglycemia. You have high amounts of blood glucose, because of which many organs, on a prolonged basis, many organs have a trouble, and then they degenerate and cause problems. So there are two types of diabetes. If you're talking about diabetes mellitus and diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus is frequent urination due to lack of vasopressin and so on. The reabsorption of water in the kidney doesn't happen. Diabetes mellitus is specifically about hyperglycemia. So there are two types of diabetes mellitus, that is type 1 and type 2. Those are the most common ones, but there are also another common one is kind of nowadays gestational diabetes. The pregnant women do get diabetes temporary in a way, but it might lead to serious problems. So one has to keep track of it. But there are also not so well characterized, but many other types of diabetes. But they're not well characterized. So in all of them, what is common is hyperglycemia. So why it happens is, what results in high hyperglycemia, that is blood sugar, blood glucose, that is the basis for categorizing these into separate groups. Often, in general, in public, we would know about type 1 and type 2. In type 1, it is lack of insulin. And in type 2, it is about, even though there is insulin, the cells are not responding to insulin. Okay. So anytime we are trying to treat a disease, the first thing that we need to know is the biology of the disease or pathobiology of the disease. Only then we will be able to address the situation or issue properly. So diabetes mellitus type 1 is about, it is less common than type 2. We will discuss about type 2 in a while. Often it is, as I told you, it is lack of insulin, right? There is the insulin producing cells are destroyed. Those are the beta cells. Because beta cells are destroyed, there is no production of insulin, beta cells of pancreas. We will see that as well. I'm just trying to give a general introduction. So why are these insulin secreting beta cells destroyed? There are multiple theories. Some people say it might be because of viral infection. Some people say that there is some genetic predisposition for the beta cells to die out sooner. And the others say it could be because of autoimmune. I think this is what people find. People think it is mostly autoimmune. I think so. So because of autoimmunity or whatever could be the case, the beta cells are dead, and because of which beta cells are the ones that produce insulin. If beta cells are dead, then insulin producing cells are also dead. I mean, insulin is not produced, because of which the blood glucose increases. In type 2 diabetes, the problem is not about insulin production. Insulin is produced into the bloodstream endocrine system. Insulin reaches the target cell. Typically, the target cells are skeletal muscle cells. And liver cells, the ones that store glucose as glycogen, so that whenever there is a requirement, the muscles can break down the glycogen and use to produce glucose and metabolize it to generate energy. Liver is another site where large amounts of glycogen are stored, which will be, upon a stimuli, then the glycogen is broken down by glycogenolysis. Glucose is produced and secreted into the blood, which is then circulated to the rest of the body. So the trigger for these kinds of cells to take up blood glucose comes from insulin. So the insulin is produced, and insulin is produced by beta cells, but then insulin is produced by the cells. It might bind, but the cell fails to respond. Normally, insulin binding to the cell would allow or increase the uptake of glucose. But in type 2 diabetes, even though there is insulin produced, somehow the target cell is not stimulated to take up glucose. There could be several reasons. There could be inability of insulin to bind to the cell. Even if the insulin binds, there is inability for response that should be generated to take up the glucose. Okay. The other one I was telling, diabetes, gestational diabetes. The Sometimes the pregnant women have high blood glucose, and because of which the baby receives high concentration of glucose, and then sometimes the baby grows more than required, or actually abnormal in growth, in the sense overgrowth. That's the correct term. Overgrowth is not a good thing for the mother or the baby also. You should also remember that the birth canal is usually much smaller than the human head. The human head, apparently, our superpower is kind of brain, and we are increasingly seeing the size of brain increase. And during birth, the one of the problems in the olden days, at least, many mothers and children died during the process of delivering because of the difficulties with which it would have come out. And if the baby, because of gestational diabetes, overgrows, then there is much more difficulty for birth, and that could be a problem as well. So they are nowadays, we have modern technology, we are monitored and so on, and then we can take appropriate action. And now it is we are majority of the cases, it's no longer normal birth. It is usually cesarean or C-section, where they cut open and take out the baby from somewhere around here, I guess. Okay, so that is one more thing that we need to know. If we look at the cross section of pancreas, you would find that there are several cells: alpha cells that secrete glucagon, there are beta cells that secrete the insulin, delta cells that secrete somatostatin. There are exocrine pancreas and F cells that secrete pancreatic polypeptide. In this way, if you see, the pancreas is playing the biggest role in terms of um, uh, teaching or kind of stimulating the cells or the rest of the body about its energy requirements. So it's actually kind of coordinating the whole things. We'll see in this slide what each of these actually do. I'm sure you already have studied these, but it's all right to just have a look at it again. Glucagon is important for breakdown of glycogen in liver and muscles. That is called as glycogenolysis. And thereby, because it is resulting in glycogenolysis, that means glycogen will produce. Glycogen will give glucose. And from liver and other places, you will have the glycogen mixes with the blood and then glucose will get circulated to rest of the body. So glucagon increases the blood glucose for ready consumption by several other tissues. Especially this would happen when we are kind of in rigorous activity. Insulin, on the other hand, it increases uptake of glucose. We should not say membrane permeability. This is a wrong term to use because it is actually, membrane permeability is like diffusion, right? If you have a molecule here and it is moving inside, then it is membrane permeability. That is, membrane is allowing it to have. But if you have channels or something like this through which it goes, I think you shouldn't refer to it as membrane permeability. So we'll just say it as glucose uptake. And then the glucose that is taken up usually results in oxidation, thereby releasing energy. But if the energy is too high, then so say assume that glucose has been taken up and the cell has taken more than required, especially that of liver cells or skeletal muscle cells, then this will be converted into glycogen. So insulin also has this effect of of making glycogen. So this process would be glycogenesis. Okay, as opposed to compare here glycogenolysis, and insulin is kind of stimulates glycogenesis. So eventually, insulin is reducing the blood glucose because it's stimulating several target cells to take up the insulin. Yeah, I already discussed these. So somatostatin, it is about inhibition of release of gastrointestinal hormones and so on. We are right now focusing mostly on insulin because diabetes is about it. Okay. So we'll have furthermore a little more discussion, a brief discussion kind of thing about how these things are regulated. One doesn't expect that both glucagon, somatostatin, and others are expressed at the same time. So there is a kind of a regulation between these three different cells: the alpha cell, the beta cell, and the delta cell. So alpha cell produces glucagon, repeating, beta cells produces insulin, and delta cell produces somatostatin. So these three kind of have inhibitory effect on each other's cell type. Okay, insulin production will inhibit the production of glucagon. Similar the case with the somatostatin. Production of by alpha cell, production of glucagon um, will stimulate insulin and beta cells and delta cells. So what I want you to get from this is just a beauty of how this is organized and how the regulation of these endocrine system or these three from the pancreas are regulated. So just keep that in mind. And at the level of organs, there are multiple things that happen. Blood glucose, and for blood glucose to be reduced, it is about insulin, right? Insulin is produced by beta cells, and many different cells, many different tissues kind of influence beta cells. It's like a signaling pathway. You can think of it as that way. And the production of insulin and blood glucose, they have a lot of influence on many other tissues, including the brain. I hope you realize that brain is intolerant to hypoxic conditions. That means lack of oxygen, brain is almost dead. The other one required, brain is one of the tissues that consume a lot of glucose. Other than the heart, I think that is the second largest one, largest consumer of glucose within the body, even in a resting body. If you're talking about a vigorously acting one, then skeletal muscles may be doing that. But brain and heart do consume even at sleeping level also. And glucose, say in majority of the other tissues, they can survive on several other compounds as well. But I think brain needs continuous supply of glucose. It may be able to, I mean, if you're starving, if one is starving for a day or fasting, it results in headache. But primarily, I think it is about trying to metabolize ketone bodies, and then it starts to result in headache and so on. So the regulation of blood glucose is very important. Okay, otherwise it's going to cause a lot of problems in the body. So type 2 diabetes, we are trying to just have a look at it once again, just because this is the most common diabetes we see in the modern society. The healthy one, I will just go with this. The healthy one, from pancreas, insulin is produced, and the insulin is taken up by or interacts with the insulin receptor. And insulin receptor will cause, we will have a, I think we'll have a discussion on this in the next class. We'll look at the molecular level. I hope you have read this part in from carp cell biology. If not, we are going to discuss that anyway. So the insulin receptor will stimulate the GLUT4 transporters. Usually they are GLUT4 are present on the cell vesicles like this and in the cytoplasm. And because of insulin receptor and stimulus from there, these vesicles will fuse with the cell membrane. Thereby now the GLUT4 are on the surface and they will start taking up glucose. It is done by facilitated diffusion. This is a passive mode of import. So it does not require energy. That's what the point of it is. So in type 1 diabetes, it is, as we said before, destruction of beta cells. There is no insulin or less amount of insulin, because of which there is no stimulation of the cells, and therefore the glucose is, these GLUT4 are not, the vesicles do not fuse, so the glucose is not taken up. In type 2 diabetes, as we said, it's not the lack of insulin. Insulin is present in high quantity, and but then there is something wrong with the way the cells or the target cells respond. They are irresponsive to insulin concentration, that is insulin resistance. Okay. What we need to know also is that type 2 diabetes has kind of two phases. First phase is insulin resistance, the one that we are discussing just now, right? Even though there is insulin, the cell is not responding. And the second phase, or in an extreme phase, is like insulin deficiency occurs. We will see the cycle of it. Early morning, I will tell about myself. That's the best subject. Maybe I wake up around 6:30 or 6, and then what is the first thing? We might do some activity, whatever, but then we'll have breakfast. Huge one filled with carbohydrates, a lot of it. Then we get, so our lunchtime, say it is around 1 p.m. and say this, the breakfast is around 8 a.m. Okay. And say dinner is at 8 p.m. Say, for example, like this. Okay. We are supposed to have 3 kind of meals. And we are supposed to have meals, or whatever food we take in should be proportionate to 2 things. One is our metabolic rate, and the second one is our physical activity. These are the 2 determinants about that tell us how much we should take in. Metabolic rate is, it depends on person to person, but in general, say until from your childhood, say 1 year to somewhere around 30 years or so, approximately, okay, your metabolic rate is usually high. After that, the metabolic rate actually goes down. Okay, so the food that we are eating is not burnt out. Metabolic rate can be simply said as that. What is, are we eating up the food that we have? Are we burning it out or storing? If you are not burning it out, we are going to store it. The same is the case with physical activity. If I'm doing 10 units of 10 units, if I want 10 units of food, okay, just say it as in the energy and just putting, and our physical activity is 10 units, then that is a balance between what we are taking in and what we are spending as if in the form of physical activity. Of course, these 2, physical activity and metabolic rate, are related. Okay, just keep that in mind. But if we have 10 units of food and 100 units of food and 10 units of work, then there is an imbalance. If you're taking 10 units of food and 1 unit of energy, work, physical activity, then also you have imbalance. So again, coming back to our schedule, between 8 a.m. and the lunch time and the dinner time, we eat several other times. And why do we eat? We eat because we are bored. I am eating because I am bored. We have to make several, if it is at home, we make several trips to the fridge and see what is there. Anything that is there, we have to consume it, kind of thing. Or a friend brings something, chips, lot of carbohydrate or calorie rich food, and also a lot of junk food. So what I'm meaning to say is, when is the blood actually when is the blood actually not pumped with 1 second, yeah, when is the blood not pumped with glucose? Where is the glucose that is coming from? The glucose is coming from the intestine. Say we are eating food, and from the upon digestion and intestine, glucose is being produced, and this glucose should be taken up by an organ, say, right? We ate food at 8 a.m. Glucose is released. We are having intermittently many times. That means even though insulin is produced and it triggers the cells to take up glucose, we are constantly pumping in glucose into the blood from the intestine because we are overeating. I hope you're trying to see the point. And once we are doing that too often, the target tissue will start to become resistant. Okay, there is some problem with the insulin level because it is always on. The insulin is always in the blood. Then the cells kind of become resistant to that amount of insulin. Say, for example, 10 units of insulin. If we were living as wild animals do, we would have had difficulty finding food. What is our general course of any animals, wild animals diet? You hunt. There is They wake up, they stretch. If you are hungry, you hunt or you go grazing, um, then eat, and then sleep. That's the routine of an animal. So these two are spending energy to acquire energy, and eating is this is where intake of that is to get energy, and then here any repair and other things usually happen. In humans, we don't hunt. We are not having the concept of hunting anymore. We do work, but it's not like vigorous activity. Our bodies are not getting this. We are not having the vigorous activity that is required prior to food. So I like to always think of biology. If there is a question, and my answer, if I have to find an answer, I would compare with wild animals and see how is their physiology. And if we were animals, what would we be doing? We are animals. If we were living as wild animals without this support of science and technology, what would we be doing? That is what our ancient humans were. So that would be a good reference point for us to think of what our biology should have been. Before the invention of agriculture and other things, we would have been hunting each day, food on a daily basis, to to do a lot of work. Even after agriculture, people worked a lot just to have the food. But in modern humans, we don't have to do that. We just have to have father's money, and then we get our things that done. So that is what we did until maybe 25 something. After that, probably we get a job, good job, and then we start earning money by doing some kind of small little work, maybe involving brain and other things. We get a lot of money. There is no physical activity. That's the problem point I'm trying to say. So because we are constantly yeah, if we were wild animals, the number of amount of time the blood insulin secreted or in the blood would be only in this place, right after eating, that the food is digested and then insulin is produced here. But as I was drawing our schedule, 8 a.m. and lunch, every time we are bombarding our stomach with lot of food. It is pleasure eating or something. I like to eat too. It's not. I think some of you look like twigs. Probably you're not eating as much, or maybe your metabolic rate is high. So insulin is constantly produced. So the target cells become resistant to that concentration of insulin. Okay, so because of that, what does say there is insulin is produced but the cells are not responding, because of which there is high blood glucose. So if there is high blood glucose, it triggers the beta cells to produce more insulin. Okay, we will also read about it in the next classes, I think. How insulin is sorry, how blood glucose and insulin secretion, they are timed. We will look at it later on. But high blood hyperglycemia induces production of insulin, and still, even though there are 100 units of insulin, the cell is not responding. Then because of the high blood glucose, again the beta cells are producing more and more insulin. So that creates an exhaustion of insulin secreting cells, and they overwork and kind of undergo apoptosis. And now we have completely the apoptosis, beta cells are dying out, because of which it might result in insulin deficiency. So type 2 diabetes starts as insulin resistance. Or long periods of time, it increasingly results in insulin deficiency because of exhausted beta cells undergoing apoptosis. Okay, so mostly the things that they are occur in older individuals, physical activity reduces, and probably there are other genetic predispositions. If you read carp, there is a nice point about it. I can't recollect now. About why some of the Japanese population live longer. It has to do with apolipoprotein and so on. Try to have a look at it. So increased blood glucose causes multiple things. I mean, the symptoms, we will just look at it. The first one is glucosuria. In olden days, they used to describe a person in very olden days. Okay, they used to say that guy is so good, or is a nice person. Even his urine is sweeter. That's why ants actually go and feed on his urine. So apparently, when somebody urinates, and then there will be a lot of ants coming up and taking it. Not everybody's urine. Apparently, it is because of a lot of glucose that is present in the urine. So that is one in the in I mean 10, 15, or 20 years back. Majority of the blood glucose, diabetes is done by sampling glucosuria. Later, now we have it as testing the blood glucose, that is much more reliable. So there are a lot of other things. This is one of the points: smell of acetone. The target cells are not receiving enough glucose because they are unable to take up the glucose. They are unable to take up glucose. It depends on whether it is type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes. In type 1, because there is no insulin. In type 2, because the cells are not responding to the insulin signal. So as a result, the cells will be forced to use other alternate means, like gluconeogenesis and other pathways. Probably those byproducts through lungs may come off, any volatile kind of things, and that might smell acetone type. and there will be gradual and loss of the whole body gets there will be weight loss. Mostly the weight loss is about muscle is lost, muscle tone is lost. Then with the brain there are you feel thirsty, you feel hungry, there's a lot of lethargy, and there is blurred vision, and so on. Okay, so the there are multiple points that you should understand. Is diabetes is kills the person in a slowly in multiple ways, if not one way the other way, something like that. The many side effects that we know of the human body, it is about high blood glucose. Okay, that's you should remember. Hyperglycemia, that is what the cause of these problems. One of it is cardiomyopathy, diabetic cardiomyopathy, diabetic nephropathy. Kidneys are lost. They are pumping out a lot of glucose. They are overworking, trying to filter out the glucose from the blood and secrete it out through the urine. So that is one of the problems will happen there. Diabetic retinopathy, tooth diseases, periodontal diseases, and encephalopathy. So all are important organs. You cannot imagine. I mean, if there is heartbeat stops, the body is dead, right? The first time the heart starts beating, and heart never stops beating, and if it stops, there is no person, right? So that's one of the tissues we need to work very very well for a long time. And brain is another one. Anything you take is going to cause lot problems to the patient. Diabetic retinopathy is something like this, that you have the retina, and the retina does have blood vessels, fine ones, but occasionally what may happen is small hemorrhages may happen, or aneurysms. You can think of it as small spurt of blood vessels forming, and so on. And I hope you realize that this is the what do you call, this is the retina, which is important for capturing the images. And if there are blood vessels, blood or anything, blood vessels obstructing or so, the image in that location is usually lost. So what happens is, one second, yeah. So this is how a patient with diabetic retinopathy might have might see the same image as compared to that of normal vision, right? Because these areas on the retina are covered up with either hemorrhages or aneurysms, because of which that part is blurred and cannot see. That part is doesn't show up any vision there. Okay, this is what will happen. And yeah, I think I was saying the same thing. This is the other one important is the periphery or terminal parts of our body will be the fingers and feet. And in all, as we were saying before, the blood should be supplied to the whole body continuously. Mostly it requires oxygen, and oxygen is important for metabolism to happen, and that will generate energy, and energy is everything. We can think of our whole body as a mass of energy, right? In what may happen in diabetic patients is these blood vessels, they become narrow, like in here. That means the amount of blood, the rate of blood flow through the um, constricted blood vessels is much lesser compared to a normal one. And also there is one another part is for the health of the nerves. The normal one grows fine, because also I think these two are related. If you're not having enough oxygen, then also the the nerves are also damaged, and that can result in several problems, especially with something called as something like this, where if the blood vessel somewhere here has completely blocked off because of, it could be because of any small clot or any of those reasons, then all these tissue downstream of that, which is actually to which the blood vessel is supplying the blood, does not receive any more oxygen and they start dying immediately. Okay, our bodies are not tolerant to hypoxic conditions. They can have for a while, but they will switch from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration. As you all already know, anaerobic respiration results in 2 ATP molecules per glucose, 2 net ATP molecules per glucose molecule, compared to that of about 32 ATP molecules for one glucose molecule. So the stored reserves are going to be used up very fast, and there are a lot of waste produced, like lactic acid and other things. And then the cell starts, they do not have any more reserves, and the cell starts dying. The tissues downstream, if there is no supply of oxygen, then they start dying. And it is basically kind of necrosis. And in that case, in sometimes, especially if we walk, and the feet are some things that actually endure a lot of stress, because the whole body weight is on our feet, isn't it? That means that is one of the tissues that is always having mechanical stress. The whole body weight is on that. And if you are walking, and some of these locations are much more also prone to damage. So basically what I'm trying to imply here is some parts of the feet may start dying out very rapidly, something like that. And there is only one solution. This is this somewhere around here or so, the blood vessel is blocked, and then this whole tissue, the cells that stopped receiving any blood, and then I hope you can see that this is all necrosis. Necrosis is different from apoptosis. In necrosis, the cell just opens up and pours out everything like this. Apoptosis is something like an implosion. It becomes into smaller blobs, and then these are cleaned up by the phagocytes. Necrosis is just opening of the cells, and it is like degradation of the cells. And if they eventually they will have to remove the uh, remove or amputate the feet. And say, for example, if this is something like a feet, say, and this is where the necrosis has happened. Okay, cutting till here does not solve the problem. The amputation should happen based on its amputation should it is removing the damaged tissue, because that is not the point. Because even if you cut and there is insufficient supply of blood to the location where the amputation has been made, then repair does not happen. For repair, again, one needs enough oxygen and other things, and immune cells and many other stuff. So amputation is typically done until where the supply of blood is good. Okay, and I hope you can notice that they made such a way that the wound is as small as it is possible, as small as possible. They cover up the rest of it with the skin, so that the wound is less, the healing and the regeneration of the skin is required regeneration is actually lesser. But once people reach a kind of this stage, it's actually it's only going downwards from then on, right? That means these people have reached a certain age, metabolic situation where the blood vessels are improper, especially to the terminal blood vessels, like in the feet and so on. So the diabetes has in diabetic patients, the in terms of angiogenesis, there are some ways of how we can see it. In some tissues, it is pro-angiogenesis. That means it's increasing the formation of more number of uh, blood vessels. In some other, it is reducing the number of angiogenesis. It is anti-angiogenesis. Say I was talking about the peripheral vessels, just like in the feet and so on. There, it is anti-angiogenic. New blood vessel formation is very reduced. Whereas in as I also discussed about retina, where the hemorrhage or aneurysms may happen, there it is kind of pro-angiogenic. That means more blood vessels are likely to form there, and it's an obstruction if it is happening in the retina, and if it is not happening in peripheral vessels, that is another obstruction. So you can see other tissues also where proangiogenesis may happen in several tissues, say in cancer or kidney glomerulus and so on. And in heart and other places, it is anti-angiogenesis. So what is the treatment for it? I want to use this slide for uh, to tell, and also as in a daily life, how we should actually try to shape our daily life. So if somebody is having diabetes, if it is diabetes, type 2 diabetes, then we should have managed our food intake. We should sorry, if it is type 1 diabetes, we can take insulin, right? Then it is fine. Then insulin shot, we should have managed our food, and we should have included uh, exercise. Even if it is type 2, either of think of it as any of the diabetes, our intake of food should be proportional to metabolic rate. Metabolic rate is dependent on two things. One of it is age factor, and also sex is also there. In the females may have lesser than that of males, but we will not talk about that. So age, and typically the other one is the amount of physical activity we have in our daily life. Physical activity, when you say, I think there were some experiments done, or kind of thing, experiments. There is, say, for example, this is the whole daytime. Okay, I'm putting it on a scale like this. So this is, say, 6 a.m. and say 10 p.m. Okay, that's the daytime, or our active time. And they compared, they made into several groups. The one group is following as usual daily routine. The one other group is doing little exercise here, little here, little here, little here, all through day, little bit. And one other group is going to do only one big lot of exercise in the evening. Okay, I hope you understood that. I'll stop with this one particular experiment. So people who were doing lot of activity all throughout the day apparently are more healthy, and actually also happy. Okay, and the third group did nothing, so they are the saddest people, probably. Okay, other than many other stuff, probably. um, these people are happy, but they are not as healthy as these people. So if you had every 2 hours or something, simple stretching or walking around a little bit with little vigorous, they are much more healthy, and they are much more fit also. But our current situation in terms of as a learning, you or me as teaching, we do everything. We are either in this is group A, group B, and group C. We are either in group C or group B, not so much in group A. I think we should be able to shift to this group A style of exercise, or the daily routine, so that we'll be healthier. Okay, I'll stop here. I think you Any questions?
So,
Yes.
doesn't the brain consume more oxygen than heart?
Um, I don't think it consumes more, but it is possible. Okay, I'm not saying it is not. It is impossible that brain consumes. But I would tend to believe that the heart is taking more because it's more of mechanical energy. Mechanical energy is consumes more. I think so. Or do you have any otherwise? Did you learn anything somewhere?
Uh, in biochemistry, we learned like brain consumes